Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to the Dusty Trails and Tall Tales podcast. I'm your host, Matthew. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Henry Parke. Henry's the Western film editor for True West magazine, the creator of Henry's Western Roundup, and author of The Greatest Westerns Ever Made and the People Who Made Them. Henry, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Matthew. I've been looking forward to this and
Yes,
enjoying your podcasts.
I have as well. I've been following your blog for many years. Why don't you tell us how you first got started with film and with storytelling?
Oh, I'd be happy to. Well, I've always been a storyteller, been a writer as long as I can remember, although it wasn't originally Westerns. I wrote my first feature length screenplay when I was 13, and it was a comedy. And usually, for most of my life, I have veered more towards comedy and films noir than westerns. Uh, I was always a big fan of westerns, but the thing was, I always thought I didn't have enough historical background to really write them. Of course, if I had realized how little history most people who write westerns know, then I would have jumped into it decades ago.
Are you planning on writing any Western fiction?
Well, I have had nothing published along that line. I have written a Western novel, which I've had on a shelf for probably 5 or 6 years, and I ought to pull out and try again. And I've written a few Western screenplays, haven't made any deals on those. I have had a couple of movies made in other genres. As I say, I've mostly been writing screenplays most of my life and just sort of drifted into the world of writing about film rather than just writing film itself.
Uh, what are some of the film plays that you've had made?
My last year in college, I wrote a picture, co-wrote it, which is called Speedtrap. I was working with a gentleman who represented American films overseas and picked up foreign films for American distribution. A man named Fred Mintz, who had distributed a picture. We're talking about this in like around 76 or so. Uh, and he had been the guy handling the distribution of the original Gone in 60 Seconds. And he kept looking at it and saying, we're making so much money and this is such a crummy movie. And think how well we could do if we had a good movie. So he had an idea for a script story. And he was from Romania. So his English was perfectly good for having conversations, but certainly not for writing dialogue for American characters. So I met him when he was running a film festival, an animation film festival. I was a ticket ripping the story, and uh, we ended up doing the screenplay together. And so this film became Speed Trap with Joe Don Baker and Tyne Daly, and
Oh,
a few of the greatest villains of all time in westerns, as well as car crash films, which this was Robert Loggia, Richard Jekyll, and Timothy Carey.
wow.
And some years later, I wrote a film noir called Double Cross, uh, with which stars Patrick Bergin, Jennifer Tilly, and Kelly Preston.
Wow, what inspired that?
Um, well, let me see how I can clean that story up. Uh, well, what it was about was a fellow who is driving cross country. He's had kind of a rough time. He's was kind of a shady stockbroker and went to jail for a while, and now he's out. And to give you an idea of the period that it's set in, he was setting up to open a video store. So he's driving cross country with a car full of videotapes, and he gets in a minor car accident, which he's the victim of. Not it's not his fault. And to be a nice guy, he agrees to lie to the woman who hit an insurance company about how it happened, and not realizing that in doing that, he's given her an alibi for a murder.
Oh
So that's that's how that one came along. But
wow.
actually, I got involved in film as a teenager. I started working, making student films when I was 13 or 14, I think, with the Young Filmmakers Foundation in New York. And a few years later, I was helping teach their film workshops. And it just went from making student films of that kind to NYU. And as I say, my last year in film school, we sell that script Speedtrap. And that's what took me to Hollywood.
Weren't you involved in some of James Cameron films as well?
Oh, yes. Well, I've done a lot of different kinds of jobs. One thing about coming out of film school and working on a lot of films is I've worked in a lot of different uh, positions on films, and I worked on Jim Cameron's first film, which was Piranha 2: The Spawning. Now there has been a more recent film called just Piranha 2, and it is not that one. This is one from the early '80s, and uh, but it was about piranhas, as you can imagine. And
Yeah.
I was a sound effects editor. I was in charge of all the screams and chewing noises, which, with a piranha movie, you can imagine there were quite a lot. And it was really interesting to work with Cameron, of course, who went on to so many huge films, the Avatar films and so on. He was so meticulous that he didn't the all of the recorded sound effects when you would look up sharks eating people were never good enough for him, and so we recorded our own. Which what we did was we in the sound studio we had these huge vats of sloppy oatmeal, and we these wooden ladles and slap them in and out, and you would have the sort of smash sound and the slurp sound when you'd pull it out.
Yeah.
And then we got hunks of fabric. And do you know what pinking shears are?
No.
Oh, they're the kind of scissors that they use to cut cloth. They have, instead of straight blades, they have sort of jagged like teeth. And so we would cut, actually, we'd cut sheets of cardboard with that. So you have rip, rip, rip sound. And then Jim would meticulously lay the cutting sound with the slurping sounds of the spoon coming out of the oatmeal. And it sure sounded to me like people getting eaten by sharks.
Dang. Well, how do you go from that to being so heavily involved with westerns as you are now?
Well, as I say, I always loved Westerns. Excuse me. Grew up watching lots of them. Um, it is funny to remember that I was, of an age that I was looking forward to the next John Wayne movie to come out. And so a lot of them first run in local theaters in Brooklyn. But what happened in particular was uh, I started, I was just catching Westerns when I could in theaters. Now I'm talking like around 2010. And I was always finding out about film festivals at the last minute. The last day is now it's a Joel McRae festival, and the last movie is on, and I missed 5 days of it, and that bugged me. Uh, and I thought maybe there is something for a website here, because most genres by then had lots and lots of websites and people following them. But there was very little about Westerns online at that time, because uh, I think serious Westerners were kind of hostile to the internet. I used to say that we don't have a lot of followers at first because it's very hard to balance a laptop on a Stadelhorn. But So I just started writing about film festivals and what channel, what various cable services then were showing what movies. And almost immediately, I started getting contacted by uh, spaghetti western actors and writers and other people making low budget westerns who wanted a place to tell their story. And so that was the birth of Henry's Western Roundup, and that grew really very quickly. And uh, I was at a Western Writers of America convention and met the editor of True West there, uh, where at which point, excuse me, my good pal Courtney Joyner was their film reviewer. And when he happily got too many screenwriting jobs and had to give that up, they knew me and he had recommended me. And so I got brought in, and that was 10 or 11 years now that I've been True West's film editor.
Well, what are some of the things you do in that role, as far as for the magazine?
Well, the number one thing I do really is ultimately to write most of the Western film articles. They do have from time to time, other people contribute pieces, but I have my column there every issue, and um, I'm not I always, of course, have at least one article in there and one DVD or Blu-ray review. Um, but yeah, essentially that is it. Uh, I'm not usually that involved in other Western articles, excuse me, Western film related articles, except lately they've been having me do quite a bit. I don't know if you saw an issue or two ago looking at, oh gosh, was it American Primeval? I'm not sure if
Yeah,
you caught
I remember
any,
that.
but I ended up with one issue. I think I had five different articles in it because, looking at it from the screenplay, from the uh, history of the events that they were detailing versus, uh, how they treated it with fiction, interviewing people, the writers, authenticity people, actors. So actually, it's over the last year or so, I've really gotten to be in the magazine more and more.
What did you think of American Primeval?
I thought it was very entertaining, which is, well, I mean, that's a very important thing because I think it's starting, every time a Western does well, it helps the genre. And
Yeah,
every time it does badly, it hurts everyone because there is always the stigma of, because, I mean, the very first movie made in 1903 was the Great Train Robbery. It was a Western. And so people are very quick to say, the Western's dead. It's too old fashioned. Nobody cares about Westerns anymore. So anytime one gets attention, I think it's a great thing.
yeah,
Um, there are real, of course, serious issues of history uh, in the story, in the treatment of it. I think uh, they certainly leaned more into the entertainment than getting all the details right, and it's still among historians a hugely controversial uh, event. The Mormon slaughter of all of those pioneers. I mean, you just say
yeah,
that phrase, the Mormon slaughter of pioneers. People do get kind of uncomfortable. But
yeah.
I think that, well, what I hope is that people who watched it, uh, A, wanted to see another Western, and B, maybe picked up a book or read an article online or in a magazine, especially when I wrote, about what really happened. Because just like people don't know Western movies like they sure don't know our history the way they should.
Yeah.
How did you like it?
I liked it. It was pretty good. Like you say, it wasn't exactly historically accurate. I would say there were a few things that weren't, you know, but it was good overall. I even renewed my Netflix subscription just so I could watch it.
Oh, terrific.
And then I
Uh,
canceled it right after.
well, that's, uh, one of the most maddening things today of just trying to keep track of what to watch is that every show you want to see, that, every new thing is on a different service.
Yeah,
And uh, I think I probably wouldn't still have Paramount Plus if it wasn't for Taylor Sheridan. He's got so much up there
yeah,
that it's worth it. But every time I see something Apple Plus, well, sometime it'll be available in a screener or something, or
yeah,
someplace else. Nothing against Apple Plus. I'm just mentioning them because most recently I've seen a number of things that sounded real good, and then I said, no, I'm not buying a fourth service.
yeah. Well, let's talk about your book, The Greatest Westerns Ever Made, and how did it come about?
Well, the way it came about was I was really fortunate because I always wanted to do a book. And a lady who worked for Two Dot Publishing found me. She'd been reading my articles, and she approached me with the idea of doing a book. And her initial idea was to do one of those, 100 greatest westerns, and a story about each one, that kind of thing. And there have been a number of good books done that way, which was the reason why I didn't really want to do that. um, and suggested to her, why don't we do it from, as long as you like my stuff based on the articles you've read in True West, uh, why don't we approach it that way? Because, in fact, the book is made up of about 80 articles that I originally wrote for True West. Uh,
Yeah,
excuse me. Although one of the really fun things about it is that in editing the articles, we didn't just like slip the pages out of the magazine and put them into a book form. Um, I went through all of them, and occasionally there are things like, well, people that I interviewed then have since passed away, and so I have to put things in past tense, and sort of put things just time wise into a context. But one of the things about writing for a magazine as opposed to, say, the internet is that uh, you are really tied into a certain number of words per article. When you're told to do 800 words for an average column, that isn't 850. It's really, and it's also not 700 for that matter. Um, but almost always, when I'd be writing articles, what I'd be doing was cutting stuff out, to fit it into the space that allotted, so that they could have ads for resorts and guns and things like that placed around it.
yeah,
And when I went back to edit the book, I suddenly realized, hey, I have a whole lot more play in the book than I had in the magazine. So even if you'd read every article in the book, in the magazine, almost every article has information in it that was not in the magazine version. So that
yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
Well, who are some of the articles? Have you interviewed people, or are they just
Yeah.
who are some of the most interesting people you've interviewed?
Oh gosh, I one of my absolute, well, probably my two of my absolute favorites were Robert Duvall and Bruce Dern. Uh,
Yeah,
and those were just so much fun. And Robert Duvall was just great to talk to about, going back to films like True Grit and Forward to Lonesome Dove, and his other westerns. He just is such a fine actor, and to hear his approach to it, and to hear from him what it's like was like working with John Wayne, and uh, things like that. Bruce Dern, I had the best 3.5 hour lunch of my life with him. He was just so much fun, and had just, I mean, I could have probably done a book just from that interview. He had so many wonderful stories uh, about not only making films, but it was so interesting to me to learn what an athlete he is, and what that a big focus of that is as soon as we started talking and he found out I was from the East Coast, he wanted to know what high school I went to and was I on the track team and who did my school play in in matches. And he still runs.
Hmm.
Uh, and was very proud at the time that he had just won in his age group a recent race that he had done.
Oh,
I love talking to Norman Lear, who nobody thinks of as a Western guy, but he did one Western series, The Deputy, with Henry Fonda, and had just fascinating stories about his work on that show, what it was like to work with Henry Fonda. And he's when we were done, he sent me the loveliest note, which I have framed, where he thanks me for reminding him of all of the fun he had doing that show and working with Henry Fonda, which he hadn't thought about in decades.
hmm.
So you've had a great time talking to a lot of fascinating people.
Yeah. But what do you consider the greatest westerns ever made? If you could pick, say, a top five.
Oh, that's funny because usually people ask me for a top one, and so
Yeah.
I work on honing that. My absolute favorite Western is Stagecoach, um, which to me is the Citizen Kane of Westerns. And
Yeah.
I know it was made before Citizen Kane, but Orson Welles did watch it a half dozen or more times before making Citizen Kane and always said John Ford was the only director he ever studied or felt any need to. So I love that film. I love, and this is going to be kind of a hit or miss list. Love The Magnificent Seven. Uh, I love excuse me, which was I going to, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
I love all of the Randolph Scott, Bud Bedecker westerns, the Ranone westerns. I love the ones that Jimmy Stewart did with, oh gosh, I'm just going blank on his name. James, the fellow that he did all of those great ones, like, gosh, I'm getting punchy. There's a series of like five really excellent westerns he did at Universal, and I'm just going blank. Uh, but those ones, I will
Uh, yeah.
text it to you when I think of his name. I've got too many names buzzing around in my head.
Yeah.
Uh, what are your favorites?
Oh, I've always liked the good, the bad, the ugly. I think the outlaw Josie Wells is a personal favorite of mine,
Oh, mine too.
and I like Unforgiven a lot as well. Clint's
Yes.
pretty.
It's funny. Speaking of Josie Wales, I love that picture, and as you know, in the book, I have an article about the outlaw Josie Wales, and had the pleasure of interviewing Sandra Locke about it, which was very nice because she was uh, not at that point talking much about Clint Eastwood and pictures she had done with him. And the lucky thing, the reason I think I got the interview was when she was with Clint in Phoenix shooting The Gauntlet. I was in Phoenix with Joe Don Baker and Tyne Daly and Richard Jekyll and Robert Loggia doing Speedtrap, and we were at the same Ramada Inn.
Oh,
And at the same time, Oliver Reed was there doing a picture called Assault on Paradise. It came out with another title, I think. But it was so strange. You'd go into this just run of the mill Ramada in the middle of Phoenix and walk into the cocktail lounge, and there sitting at the bar would be Joe Don Baker and Oliver Reed and Clint Eastwood. And it was just an amazing time to be in Phoenix.
it sounds
And
like it.
one time, uh, this, people were always going up to them asking for autographs. And a young woman walked up to Clint and asked him for his autograph. And they're all very nice about it and signing everything. And he said, sure. So she gives him a pen, but she doesn't give him paper. And she says, no, no. She pulls up her short sleeve and she says, sign my arm. And he goes, okay. And he writes Clint across it. And the next morning, the Phoenix newspaper comes out, and on the cover is her showing her arm with Clint because she'd gone straight to a tattoo parlor and had it etched into her arm. And
Yeah.
this was, as I say, this was like in the late 70s or early 80s. This was not a time when women got tattoos. And Eastwood was so horrified that he wouldn't sign anything for the rest of the shoot. But when I was emailing Sandra Locke, I reminded her of that incident, and then it was like, oh, I guess we sort of know each other, although we hadn't met, but we had shared that
Yeah.
little bit of history. So then she gave me that wonderful interview.
Yeah. Well, how overall is your book set up? It's a series of essays about different films.
Well,
How can somebody expect it to read?
what I did, I've got to say, it's an eclectic kind of a thing. It is not like a formal presentation of these are the greatest westerns, 1 through 50 or 100 or something like that. It was made up of the articles for the magazine, and they were presented. Um, they came along as opportunities came along to speak to people because, as you know from reading the book, the vast majority of them are based on interviews. I tried to
Yeah.
do as much as possible where I'm actually talking to the people involved rather than doing research into history of you know people that are no longer available to speak to.
Yeah.
And so it's broken down into classic films, classic television series, leading actors, supporting actors, ones who played good guys, ones who played bad guys. Uh, I am happy. I talked to most of the best of the really good villains. I know I mentioned Bruce Dern, but also Morgan Woodward, the guy who was a guest on Gunsmoke more than any other actor and got killed on every episode but one. Almost
Wow.
all of them by Matt Dillon.
Yeah. What?
So that,
What?
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that. So that's how I've ordered or organized it in terms of that kind of a grouping, and also uh, films that look at European or at least non-American films and less traditional westerns, things like that.
Yeah. But other than Stagecoach, what are some of your favorite sort of types of westerns, like the spaghetti western or the, you know,
Uh, well, I'm a fan of classical westerns. The John Ford's films and the Howard
yeah,
Hawks films. Uh, oh, and as soon as I stopped talking about naming, I forgot. I thought, oh, I should have said The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is
yeah,
a great favorite of mine, and also The Cowboys, another great favorite of mine. Uh, but uh, you know, I'm sorry. Now you had asked me about what particular genres of westerns I liked,
yes, sir.
and yeah, the classics. The historical classics that we've talked about. Also, I love spaghetti westerns. I was a very late inductee into the world of spaghetti westerns because I had what I think was maybe a kind of a typical sort of arrogant American attitude of what do these foreigners know about westerns? This is our history, and they're just nosing around in it. And there was a wonderful show at the Gene Autry Museum about the Sergio Leone films, and that was my first conscious introduction to spaghetti westerns. I'd actually seen others in the past and didn't even realize they were Italian. I assumed that they came from Mexico because I could tell they were dubbed. But it was such a wonderful thing to discover spaghetti westerns because it was suddenly like as if you won 500 more movies to look
Yeah.
for because they made so many so fast. Once they once they in Europe had gotten through the whole backlog of American films that had been they had not been allowed to see during the Second World War, and they
Yeah.
wanted more. Um, I think the German ones, the Karl May ones, are fascinating. They're not always great westerns, but they're very interesting. It's very interesting to see uh, the world of westerns based on the world's most popular western writer who never got to the American West until he'd retired from writing. Have you Are you familiar with Karl May?
No, sir.
Oh, well, he was this very popular German writer who became fascinated with Apaches. And I mean, he was the favorite writer for kids. I don't mean he wrote children's books, but growing up, Hitler loved him and Einstein loved him,
Hmm.
and directors like Fred Zinnemann, who of course made High Noon. He learned about the American West because he was from Europe through Karl May's stories. And there's a whole bunch of these stories, usually referred to as the Winnetou stories. Winnetou was the great Apache chief that he invented, and they were a very big thing in Europe in the early 1960s. And American actors like Lex Barker or Rod Cameron, guys who were not huge stars in the United States, but were, recognizable Western actors, would go to Europe and then become huge stars for them. And those films really are what led to Italians and Spanish people saying, "Hey, we can make these." You know, we can follow their lead and do what the Americans have been doing for so long.
Yeah.
So there's a really direct line. Oh, and one thing that I find it just amuses me is that I know a number of Mescalero Apaches uh, who have married German girls because Germans were so fascinated by these Karl May stories that they would come to the United States when they could and see what the American West was like. And if they had daughters, uh, it was a match made in heaven.
Yeah. Well, how
Uh,
have you noticed the Western genre evolving from the classics to what's being made today in film?
well, there've sort of been a few stages. We of course had a great period of silent westerns, and then when sound came in, uh, for to a great degree, westerns were relegated to children's entertainment. With the rise of the B western, and it wasn't until John Ford in 1939 uh, did Stagecoach that I'm not saying that that was the only major Western being done, but that was the one that really clicked with audiences and, Oscars and Oscar nominations that got people saying, yeah, this is a really uh, good, legitimate form of storytelling, and then, great actors will do them. Um, and so we had, that whole classic period of the 1940s. The big change that came with the 50s was uh, a sort of noirish attitude, a sort of post-war realism or cynicism, depending how you look at it, What has happened since then, as they have evolved, I think, Western features, is they've gotten progressively bleaker and darker and more realistic in quotes. Um, I sort of, I love any good storytelling. And so I have nothing against any individual well done Western, no matter how tough or bleak it is. We're talking about American Primeval. And I love the fact that that brought in a younger Western audience who was not that familiar with the genre. I love when Quentin Tarantino does another Western or a Western themed thing like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Uh, my only wish is that everything wasn't so grim and so bleak because I would love to have stuff that you could take a kid to. Uh,
Yeah.
I thought News of the World was a terrific film, which coming out during COVID did not get the attention that it deserved. But one of the things that I really liked about it was that it was a really well done, though very tough film in many ways, but it was appropriate to take a kid to, and it had things in it that would have been of interest to a kid. I
Yeah.
think that is something that we need a great deal more of.
Yeah,
But
I
I
do
do think,
too.
but there is a lot of really fine Western filmmaking going on. I did you watch 1883?
Yes, sir. I thought that was really, really well done.
I did too. I think that 1883 is the best Western stuff done for television since Lonesome Dove,
Wow.
which to me was the best thing since Gunsmoke, the original 6 seasons. Uh, so I think there is really, really good stuff being done now. I saw last year. I thought the two best westerns to come out were uh, The Thicket and uh, oh gosh, the Kevin Costner one. What?
Horizon.
Yes, thank you, Horizon.
Yeah.
And I saw those both in theaters, which was great because, as you know, so much of the good stuff is made for streaming services or at least released direct to those, so you don't get to see them in the theater. And when I saw Horizon, uh, there was one other person in the theater. And when I
Yeah.
saw The Thicket, there was no one else in the theater. And these were really two, I thought, outside, very different Western
Yeah.
films, but both so well done. And yet, where was the audience? I have heard lately that The Thicket has finally caught on and is doing extremely well on streaming services. It's very high in, I think, was it Tubi that actually produced it? Um,
Not
and
sure, but that
but
one's on my list to watch. I haven't seen it yet, but since you said recommend it, I'm gonna watch that next.
Okay, I do highly recommend it. And I have a feeling that a lot of people were put off by when you read a description of it. I know how gimmicky does this sound? It's about a guy whose sister is kidnapped by a lesbian outlaw and hires a dwarf bounty hunter to catch them. Oh my gosh, that sounds like it's
Yeah.
going to be awful. It sounds so woke and precious, and it's not. It's
Hmm.
really good. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I highly recommend that.
All right.
Did Yeah? Did you catch Horizon Part One?
I did. I really liked it, and I don't. It seems that that movie gets a lot of criticism for some reason, and I don't understand why. It, I wish he would have released part two and part three.
Oh, me too. I've been dying, especially now that I know that part two is actually done and has been shown at some film festivals and so on. I'm just dying to see it. I think that Costner made a tactical error. Uh, well, I think that, I mean, the biggest problem is people don't pay attention. They say, Horizon, new Western, Kevin Costner. I like him. I like Westerns. I'll go see it. And then it ends and they go, what? Because they
Yeah,
didn't listen to this is the first part of a four-part epic. And uh, you get a bunch of stories that are started that are very interesting, that are very well done. I think the attack on the cabin alone is worth the price of admission. I think that is the best
yes,
version of that kind of a scene. And, you know, we're Western guys. We've seen that kind of story many times, but I just thought it was the best I've ever seen.
yeah,
But it's not the whole story. It's a four-parter. And it was originally planned as a mini series. And I think it would have been smarter if he really done it that way, that so that people could watch all those parts in sequence.
yeah,
You know, if you look at like the Lord of the Rings pictures, they stand alone. They're a continuing story, but they're based on individual novels, and they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what's I think that the thing that threw people with Horizon is that it has a beginning,
yeah,
and it's a terrific beginning. But if you're expecting to have a complete story, you're going to be disappointed. So, but
yeah,
if you go in knowing that this is going to be a setup for something wonderful, then I think you'll love it. Certainly, most people I know who saw it did.
yeah. Well, are there any upcoming westerns that you know about that you could share with us? Because about what's some of the things you cover on your blog?
Uh, let's see. There's trying to think of. There's been a number of uh, semi westerns and western adjacent things. I don't know if did you catch Eddington, which I think may be gone already,
No, I
uh,
missed that one.
but that was done by a fellow named Ari Aster, who is a very top guy in the world of horror films, who wanted to make a western and uh, promoted it as a contemporary western. It's about a bunch of people in a New Mexico town during COVID, and how things get divided up politically there over who will and will not wear masks. And uh, it's it's so disappointing. He's got a marvelous cast. He's got three Oscar winners in it, and yet he lacks a plot. And you can do that with horror movies because those are about emotion, but westerns tend to be about story.
Yeah,
And so, you know, that's out there. There uh, is a very recently released western called The Wide West, uh, 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 from Alexander Nevsky, who has made a number of low budget westerns. He's a Russian uh, bodybuilder and action star who's branched out into westerns, and about a couple of sumo wrestlers that are stranded out west. Uh, I mean, there are Cynthia Rothrock has done who is a great martial arts star, has done a really impressive uh, uh, picture, Black Creek, uh, which is also about martial arts people out west, and it's
I've heard of
actually
that one, but I haven't seen it yet.
it's I've got to say it is a tremendously well done production, but of course you have to sort of go in accepting the idea that every martial artist in the world in the 1870s is going to end up in this one town, because she absolutely stocked it with really good fighters. I I realize what I'm saying is I'm talking about all of these kind of strange, not mainstream westerns, and the fact is, like you, I'm waiting for the next horizon. I'm
Yeah.
waiting for the next more western rather than kind of like a western or contemporary western black comedy that's not actually funny.
Well, we've got Flint by Louis L'Amour
Oh,
looking
that's
to look
right.
forward
You know
to.
what? I have just been seeing stuff about that online, and that one snuck up on me. I heard that it was being done, but I don't know a great deal about it. But I'm
Yeah,
certainly looking forward to that. It has been so long since there has been a new Louis L'Amour picture.
yeah. And that's always been my favorite L'Amour novel, and
Uh huh.
L'Amour has always been my inspiration for my love for westerns and for writing myself. It all came from reading his books when I was 10, 11 years old.
Uh, it's funny when I started reading Louis L'Amour novels in college. Uh, I was introduced by a couple of friends who were other people working on film crews with me. We were all student filmmakers. Uh, and the funny thing about it was that rather than being introduced by typical Westerner people, it was a Jewish Brooklyn guy and a Jamaican girl who were these big Louis L'Amour fans, and they turned me on to it. And which sort of speaks to how international the appeal of his stories are. Uh, there was a producer, Saul David, who ran at various times MGM and 20th Century Fox and produced Westworld. He tried to do other out and out Westerns. I'm talking about the movie Westworld, not the TV series. We're going
Yeah,
back to the 70s. But he was my mentor, and he uh, ran Bantam Books when that was, you know, paperback westerns were a big thing. And he's the guy that originally signed Louis L'Amour.
well,
And there was a time in the late 1960s when they were putting together a Louis L'Amour movie of the week. And this was going to be a regular series based on his, that is, a series of movies, standalone movies based on his books. And the deal was being negotiated, and everything was going very well at the studio. And Saul and Louis and a couple of the studio heads are having drinks and discussing things. And one of them said, somebody said, "Gee, I wonder what night we should put this on,
yeah.
uh, night of the week." And one of them said, "Well, I guess it doesn't really matter as long as we don't have it on Monday, so it's not opposite Monday Night Football because we'll lose all the men." And Louis said, "Well, you know, it's interesting. I actually, my books are read more by women than by men." And one of the guys, one of the executives said, "Well, I think you're wrong about that. I think your appeal, your stories is almost entirely to men." And my friend Saul told me, and I saw that deal dissolve in a moment, that Louis L'Amour was not going to let these guys who knew so little about who reads Westerns and who was interested, that they thought they knew more than Louis, and that was the end of that deal in a moment.
Yeah. There's a lot of great female Western writers around
Yes,
today
sure.
too.
Yes, indeed. Uh, Gosh, I was just trying to think of one of the writers that I talked to in my. I'm looking at my own book. That's cheating, I know. Uh, but there's a lady I spoke to, and I was struck by the fact because she's been a very successful Western novelist and has had 4 or 5 of her books filmed. And she, really was inspired almost entirely by Western movies, not really by books,
Hmm.
um, which I found interesting just because usually the inspiration doesn't work in that direction.
Yeah. Well, what do westerns mean to you personally, and why do you love them so much?
Well, I think that Westerns are stories about, well, I love American history. I think that comes into a great deal of it. I just, are kind of a romantic about the whole settling of this continent. And I just, I love stories of pioneers and things like that. But really, I think it's the appeal of rugged individuals, people that, by their own grit and determination, manage to accomplish great things. Uh, the idea that um, it doesn't take a village necessarily. That one person can accomplish great things, and between that and just the telling of our history, uh, I just love them.
Yeah. Well, Henry, thank you so much for joining us today. Your passion for westerns and your work documenting them are truly inspiring.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to share your journey with us, and for our listeners, be sure to check out Henry's book, The Greatest Westerns Ever Made and the People Who Made Them. There's, there's what the cover looks like. I also got it here behind me if you can see it on my shelf.
Right.
And be sure to check out Henry's Western Roundup to keep up to date on all the latest happenings in westerns. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.